Welcome back to the channel. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today, we are going to be reviewing The Skystone by Jack Whyte. This is an exciting series of reviews I'm going to be doing with these Jack Whyte books. I love and adore these books more than I can even tell you guys. So let's just start with what the series is about. It's a retelling of, this is book 2. I reviewed book 1 earlier this year. This is a retelling of the King Arthur legends. From the perspective that there's no magic, this is what it would have been like in the grim, gritty Middle Ages. If there were a King Arthur, and if there were a Merlin, and a Lancelot, and a Guinevere, and a Holy Grail, and a Lady of the Lake, and an Avalon, and an Excalibur, all of those things, the magic that goes with it, but there is no magic. People believe in magic. They really believe in it, and a lot of the supernatural phenomena they see in their own world contributes to their belief, like lightning, meteorites hitting the earth. Different things that go on in this world make people believe in magic so much, but as the reader, we know that it's not magic. We know there's a scientific explanation for it. That's the beauty of this series. So let's talk about the series a little bit before we get into the review of book number 2. The series is 10 books, starting with The Burning Stone. They're all published by Tor Books. The Burning Stone is book 1. And then the Skystone is book 2. So The Burning Stone is book 1, takes place with the great-great-great-grandfather of King Arthur. The Skystone takes place with like the great-great-grandfather of King Arthur. The Singing Sword takes place with like the grandfather. And then we start to get different, like if you were to read this series from book 1, 2, 3, not even knowing it was about King Arthur, you wouldn't even know it was about King Arthur until about the end of this book, when different characters start to show up, like Ulick Pendragon. Things start to show up like the Lady of the Lake. And then we start to be like, okay, this might be about the Arthurian legends. And then we get deeper into it until Uther. Uther is, the Eagle's Brood is book 4. Uther is book 5. The Saxon Shore, 6. The Ford at River's Bend, 7. The Sorcerer, 8. The Lance Thrower, 9. And then the Eagle rounds out the entire 10-book trilogy. I can't do math, folks. I know a trilogy is in 10 books. But anyway, let's talk about the Skystone and the production of these books as a whole. As you can see, Tor Books. For the first 4 books, they kind of were like they really couldn't settle on a look to the series. Then by book 5, they hired a similar artist and kind of came up with. And then I also have down here all of the paperbacks, because you know I collect all the paperbacks. So let's talk about the cover. The cover of the hardcover of the Skystone was done by John Howe. Now, a lot of you might recognize John Howe as one of the guys with Alan Lee who worked with Peter Jackson on the Lord of the Rings movie trilogy as their artists. Alan Lee and John Howe were the main designers of the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. But he did this, he was an illustrator before he did that. He did this. This came out in the early 90s. And so, but I think the cover is kind of dated. It is a little bit weak. When they did the paperback set, they went ahead and they used John Harris for all of the cover artwork. And he did a really good job with the cover art from there on out. And as we review each book, we'll compare all the covers. But John Harris, as you can see, his covers were really pretty cool here. And I'll just hold up a few of them. But if you get the series in mass market paperback, they're all going to have matching covers and matching spines. Whereas if you collect the hardcovers, you're in for the first 4 books are just kind of wildly all over the place design-wise. So, the Skystone. The Burning Stone took place about 200 or so AD, maybe 250 AD. These take place between 360 AD and 410 AD. So we're talking deep, deep, deep pre-Middle Ages. We're talking like Romanesque times in Britain. In the Burning Stone, we follow a guy who he's a Roman soldier in Gaul and Germania, and he migrates to southern England, sets up shop. They're very obsessed in this. These Romans in this book are very obsessed with these meteors that keep falling, and they're very obsessed. They know that there's something from the heavens, and they pass these tales down to their kids of there's magic in these rocks that are falling from heaven. There's something about these rocks that are falling from heaven and creating these big craters and destroying all the forests. And one day we'll know what it is. So this book is about Gaius Publius Verus and his best friend Caius Britannicus. Well, Gaius Publius Verus is he is the descendant of these guys, and he has been told these stories about these heavenly rocks that fall from the sky and create these craters. And he knows if he finds one, like his forebears told him, he can create great weapons from those stones because they are heavenly stones. They're sky stones. They're burning stones. They're sky stones. And he can mine the metals out of them, and he's just obsessed. But meanwhile, he's also a Roman soldier guarding the areas of southern England up to Hadrian's Wall. And this is very brutal. This opens with one of the most brutal, bloody, horrifying medieval ambush scenes I have ever read. So right out of the right from the get-go, we are just right in the middle of one of the most horrifying battle scenes you are ever going to read. And that's one of the things about the Jack Whyte series. This series is actually called Camulod, if I haven't said that yet. It's called the Camulod series. And it's the Camulod Chronicles, to be exact. And but it's very, very rooted in realism, just like those old Braveheart and Gladiator and those movies, but this is even more bloody. And so we open up with these scenes, and they both get injured, Gaius and his friend Caius, and they both get injured, just horrifying injuries, and they're in a tent together, and it's kind of like Gaius decides to sort of, he wants to write down his memoirs in a way. And so this is where he starts to write down his memoirs, where he talks about his entire life leading up to the finding of the Skystone. His dream is to dig one of these meteorites out of the earth and create weaponry out of it. And so we kind of get, the book is told from his perspective as he talks about his fights at Hadrian's Wall, his adventures in Africa. They go to try to conquer Africa, things like this with the Roman soldiers, and these part of that is all very bloody, very brutal. And then he ends up back in southern England at his home, never having fallen in love, but he finally meets the love of his life, just a beautiful girl. And then he gets to fulfill his dream. And all of this takes place with Gaius and Caius, our two main heroes, and they meet a big, massive brooding. Somewhere in this book, I won't tell you where exactly it happens, but they come across this brooding battle leader from Britain named Ulick Pendragon. And he's just such just a big presence in the book. Well, because we know that he is the great-great-grandfather of Uther and Arthur and all of this. So we know that the legend is starting to form. Also, our main character, Gaius, I won't tell you where in the book. I don't want to do too many spoilery things, but I'm not really spoiling much here. But his dream does come true where he does find, he assumes there's a lake near his town. It's a perfectly formed lake. And he's always wondered, how is that lake so perfectly formed? Finally, he realizes the legends that his grandfather, who was in this book, told him about these skystones would form these perfectly round craters. And he's like, that's a crater from a skystone, and there's a skystone at the bottom of that lake. So he drains the lake, he finds the meteor, It's bigger than he had ever imagined it would be. And he makes his dream of carving and forging, because if you want to know every detail of how to forge battle armor, if you want to know every detail of how a Roman soldier trains, fights, sets up his camp, dresses his horse, dresses himself, forges his own swords and armor, if you want to know every detail of that, that's the one thing that we get in the Skystone, is every detail of a Roman soldier's life is painstakingly researched in here. It's just beautiful to read. It's beautiful to read. I loved every minute of it. And everything is described so lusciously. This guy writes so well. And then when we discover that he's forging these wept daggers and stuff out of this meteorite, and testing it out, and it's his dream come true. And then his friend Caius takes a little bit of the meteorite. He just wants a chunk of it, and he surprises his buddy Gaius one day. He's just like, gives him a gift. He's like, I made a sculpture out of the Skystone that you gave me. I don't do sword making, I don't do daggers, I don't do anything, but I made you this sculpture as a token of my appreciation for you. As my friend for our whole lives, and it's a crudely made sculpture of a pregnant woman, and he says, this, I call her the Lady of the Lake because we found the stone in the lake. So here's my sculpture, the Lady of the Lake, and it's just kind of an ugly little sculpture, but Gaius just loves it. He loves it so much. And that's kind of all I'm going to tell you, because I think you can see where this is going. And if you know anything about the Arthurian legends, and that's kind of where we're at in this book. There's a lot about Stonehenge. There's a lot about druids and dark magic. Even though there is no magic, they still practice just dark, brutal, bloody, sacrificial magic and torture and medieval just horrors in this book. This is a masterclass in medieval history in and of itself. And like I said, if you didn't know this series was about King Arthur and you started in book 1, you wouldn't really realize that. You'd just think it's about Roman soldiers obsessed with meteors. And then then we start getting a few clues like Lady of the Lake, Ulick Pendragon, Stonehenge, druids, and now people are starting to think that there might be magic swords and things like that. So what a wonderful, this book 2, the Skystone, is just such a great, just like the Burning Stone here, just a great entrance point into this series that is so engrossing. And each book is 500 to 1,000 pages long. I mean, just detailed, dripping and oozing with medieval life. And I can't recommend these enough. I give the Skystone 10 out of 10. It's one of the books that I read over and over. Every one of these books, I read them over and over, just in awe of how awesome they are.